I call Stephen Kerr for around about 8 minutes. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and Martin Whitfield, who it is always a pleasure to follow Martin Whitfield when he speaks, and on this occasion he had me grabbing for Google to find out what exactly Partick Thistle had done, but I compliment Partick Thistle on their dual signage, something that had escaped my attention. Like Donald Cameron said, as a Scottish Conservative, it will surprise no members of this Parliament that we are very interested in preserving, conserving and promoting Scotland's national culture, because our national culture is the very definition of who we are. It creates our belonging, and that's a very important part of what it means to be a Scot. We belong to this land and we belong to each other, and from our natural landscape in all its beauty to our magnificent shared history to our cultural traditions, some of which have been referred to during this debate, and our locally produced legendary food and drink, we have a collective pride as Scots in everything that is Scottish. And that, Deputy Presiding Officer, extends to and includes our national languages and our local dialects. And this has been a very full and wide-ranging debate. We've allocated a considerable amount of time to this subject, and quite rightly so. And the opening speech from the Cabinet Secretary, I thought, set the tone very well. She reminded us of the economic benefits of Gaelic in particular, and also her encouragement that people who speak Gaelic should feel free and confident to speak in that language without the negativity that she described, and how important it is that our young people are encouraged to learn and to speak Gaelic. And Donald Cameron gave his usual masterful speech about a subject that I know is very dear to his heart. And I hope that the Cabinet Secretary, or the Minister, I don't know who's winding up, the Cabinet Secretary, will take to heart the heartfelt plea that Donald Cameron made about the need for Gaelic medium education workforce planning. He called in his speech for a task force to address these issues that have been mentioned by a number of speakers, and I felt that that emotional appeal in this debate requires an answer. Michael Mara, in his contribution, also talked about the shortage of GME teachers, and that something needs to be done to address that. And Willie Rennie, highlighting the need for Gaelic speaking to be seen in the context of everyday use. Again, he mentioned a crisis in social circles and underpinned the importance of getting the economic infrastructure and pillars right in order for those societies in the parts of Scotland where Gaelic should be the predominant language to thrive and to prosper. Murdo Fraser introduced characters from Sir Walter Scott. He was just about, in his usual eloquent way, to describe some passage or other about an encounter with the devil that he says stands out in his imagination as being an epoch of Scots literature, and up shot Alistair Allen. And I don't know whether an encounter with the devil and Alistair Allen go together, because the good doctor always has something very useful to say, and he did today. And I'm delighted to give way.
It's really more of an observation. It's really more of an observation, really, that in the Scots New Testament, translated from the Greek by Lorimer, at least in the apocryphal bit at the end, the only character to speak in standard English is the devil.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, I cannot better that. That goes to the heart of this debate, if I may say so. And he reminds me as an MSP for Central Scotland from that state. I will come back to my quote in a minute. I'll give way to Fergus Ewing.
In the spirit of continuing the worthy cause of educating Mr Kerr, Presiding Officer, could I share with him a piece of information I gleaned when one evening reading the fascinating and excellent Jameson's Scotch Dictionary, where I came across a word that I thought may be of interest to Mr Kerr, an old Scots word called bluffleheed. Bluffleheed, yes, Presiding Officer, I can see your recognition. Now, bluffleheed, members will know, means a person, usually male, with a very large head, but a very small brain. And I just wondered if that is a word that Mr Kerr might want to, without ascribing the word to any member of this chamber, because that would be unparliamentary.
Mr Ewing,
whether
if
I
you
could
could
add that
resume
to
your
the political
seat,
lexicon.
Mr Ewing. I think I would remind you, Mr Ewing, of the need to retain respect while engaging in debate within the chamber. And with that, I call Stephen Kerr.
I accept the education on offer from Fergus Ewing in the spirit in which it was offered, and that will be a word that I will definitely now add to my vocabulary. But I was about to say, as a Central Scotland MSP, in reference to Lorimer's superb translation of the New Testament into Scots, there is a wonderful phrase, those of you who are familiar with the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and it has this, and I remember Falkirk is very much dear to my heart as a Central Scotland MSP. And the Scots version of this verse from 1 Corinthians 13 is, "In my bairn days I had the speech o' a bairn, the mind o' a bairn, the thoughts o' a bairn. But now I'm grown man muckle, I'm through wi' Athen Bairnley," which I think is fantastic. It's a fantastic Scots translation. So I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity, Dr Allen, to introduce that into this debate. But he also mentioned in his speech Walter Scott, and he also mentioned John Buchan, these two great Scottish national patriots who were also unionists. Now, there are many other contributions that I could mention, but time does not permit me to mention them all. But there was a lot of reference to our rich, diverse national culture, and that language is at the heart of it. And Cocab Stewart said something, Deputy Presiding Officer, which I think is worthy of repetition, and that is how adept young children are from the very earliest of their years of understanding to pick up languages. I have grandchildren who are learning, in addition to English, they're learning Russian, they're learning Norwegian, they're learning French, and what they have the capacity to absorb is phenomenal. And I speak as an awestruck grandfather, but also as an awestruck monoglot, because unfortunately English is the only language that I can honestly say that I have a slight grasp of. And then just let me continue with thanking Jamie Halcrow-Johnson for mentioning the good work that the National Lottery has done in this particular field. And let me just say that having been born in Dundee and raised in Forfar, I'm very well aware of the diversity of language and dialects. And, you know, one of the things that is true of growing up in a place like Forfar is you're caught between Dundee and Aberdeen, you're caught between Dundonian and Doric, and there's a developing uniqueness about the language. And you know, this idea that these dialects don't exist within Scots can be challengeable. Because, for example, my wife, who comes from Ayr, when she first met my father, who's born and lived all his days in Angus, when they first met, my wife said to me after their first meeting, "What was he saying?" She could not fully understand everything he was saying. And that's part of the richness of our language culture and part of the heritage that we all enjoy. Dialect and language, by definition, is central to the identity of the towns, villages and cities of Scotland. And dialect and language, Deputy Presiding Officer, is undoubtedly something that is recognisable. Loyalty, locally, when we hear someone speaking in the dialect and language of our homes, then we instantly feel that sense of belonging I referred to earlier. Now, I welcome the new National Gaelic Language Plan. Gaelic is a vitally important asset for Scotland, as has been mentioned, and is representative of the richness, depth and variation that we enjoy as Scots in our cultural and social life. Now, I'm not very sure, because of the way we do things in this Parliament, how much time I have left, but I would suggest maybe I don't have very much time. How much time do I have left?
I can give you another minute or so.
A minute or so? OK, that's good. So let me just conclude then, if I've only got a minute or so, by saying that we go for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and then we don't have any time at the end. Children and young people in our classrooms who want to learn Gaelic should be able to learn the language. And we should we should utilise the technology. It's been alluded to a number of times. Why not create more virtual learning spaces? Why not create more virtual classrooms where pupils can be taught Gaelic or any other subject where there's a risk that we don't have enough of a teaching complement via Microsoft Teams or Zoom? And the teaching and promotion of Scotland's languages mustn't be just limited to Gaelic. That's been mentioned on a number of occasions. And let me just conclude by saying that all this discussion of diversity and culture in the context of what it means to be a Scot and to enjoy this fantastic culture that we have as a nation, this is the reason why I and my fellow Scottish Conservative colleagues believe that the teaching and promotion of Scots languages should be very much part of Scotland's language plan, and that we should revel in that local diversity that has been on display today, that diversity which, brought together, creates the richness of the country that we all love.
Thank you very much indeed.